Hi, I'm Ryan Picchini. I'm the host of Real Talk, Real Trust by dotCMS. I'm thrilled to be here today with Kevin Cochran. I'm a longtime industry veteran and one of the smartest people in this space. I'll let Kevin introduce himself here in a moment. Someone I dearly call a friend, and our CEO, Zain, who's been on previous episodes. So the purpose of Real Talk, Real Trust is to help marketers navigate this ever-changing digital landscape, especially as AI becomes more and more prevalent. The topic for today is building a winning content strategy in the age of AI. Couldn't think of two better people to join me today. So Kevin, maybe you can give a quick introduction, then we'll go to Zain and
Great.
start it.
Well, Ryan, it's great to see you again. So excited to be able to join you and Zain here today on the podcast. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So I'm excited about today's conversation and where it's going to lead. Kevin Cochran, I've been building enterprise infrastructure for the better part of 30 years. Currently here today at Vultr, pioneering a new global infrastructure to accelerate the build and deployment of AI native applications on the world's largest independent cloud platform. So it's the next great hyperscaler, partnered with NVIDIA and AMD to bring to market, industry-leading GPUs and making them available worldwide across 6 continents and 32 different data centers. So excited to join you all here today and looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. And Kevin, I'd be remiss for some of our listeners. You built some of the biggest software companies in the world in your career as CMO and various leadership roles, whether it's Adobe or Acquia or numerous other companies I could mention. But I think your wisdom of where you are today and where you've been is going to be super helpful for our listeners. So thanks for being with us. Zain, over to you. Just a quick intro on your side would be awesome.
Yeah, it's me again. Zain Ishaq, CEO at dotCMS. I guess quick background is I did spend 10 years, almost 12 years actually, in finance, and ended up in tech entrepreneurship role. So currently leading dotCMS for the last 3 years. Super excited to be here. Marketing is not something I would call myself an expert in, but it's definitely the most interesting part of the business. So I am trying to, stay as close to this as possible. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Thanks, Zane. And your macro perspective is something I know our listeners have really appreciated to date. And so we do like to start with a quick round of rapid fire. Kevin, the rule is 1 to 2 word answers. For folks
Okay.
like us as marketers who want to tell the whole story, it's very difficult. I'm going to hold you to 1 to 2 word answers. The same with you, Zane. Zane, in our last episode, you had a few sentences in there. So let's try and stick to the topic at hand. Okay, Kevin, I'm going to go with you first. Build a market or dominate an existing one?
Build a market.
Zane.
Build a market.
Okay, Zane, I'm going to go to you first on this one. Reach or frequency?
Oh, these are tough ones this time. Frequency.
Kevin.
Frequency.
Okay, you guys can't agree on everyone. That's not the point of this.
Yep.
Okay, so let's make sure that there's no bias going on here. Kevin, short form content or long form content?
This is a good one. I like long form content.
Zane.
I would love to give an explanation to my answer. So I'm still gonna say it short form.
Perfect.
But I guess the little caveat I'm gonna throw in is I guess audience preferences. I guess I'm talking about Gen Z as I say short form. I don't think they can.
I love it.
Be
These questions are designed for the Zane to make you squirm a little bit to try and figure out. There's a lot of
That's a tough one. That's a tough one.
We're going to go in a completely different gear. I'm going to start with Kevin on this one. Marathon or triathlon?
Oh, marathon for sure.
I was bummed. I thought you might have changed your
No.
vantage point a little bit. Zane,
Nope.
marathon or triathlon if you had to pick one?
Triathlon for me.
Triathlon. I love it. Little diversity. But both consistency or diversity are both valuable. Okay, this is a win-win for everyone as long as you guys answer with one of two answers that are the same. Vote or vote, Kevin?
Vote, excuse me, what are the options?
Vote or vote. Should people vote or should they vote? See how I did that question where there was no alternative not to vote? Vote or
Yeah,
vote, Kevin.
of course, definitely vote.
Yeah.
If you
Zane,
haven't already, by the way.
Uh-huh.
Zane, vote or vote.
Vote, absolutely. Go, go, go.
Vote 100%. Do it even before you listen to the rest of this podcast if you haven't. Okay, let's get into the topic at hand, which is building a
Mhm,
winning content strategy. Kevin, maybe I'll start with you.
mhm.
What you think about this idea of a content strategy? It makes sense to a lot of marketers. How do you articulate the value of a winning content strategy to the C-suite?
Very simple. A winning content strategy shortens your sales cycle. So today's buying committee, they need to be able to access helpful resources so they can self-educate on your value proposition, the pain points you solve, and how they can apply your solution to their real world needs. And an effective content strategy not only drives net new sales cycles, but it shortens your sales cycles and gives you higher win and close rates. And that's the name of the game. If you have a market model, the shorter your sales cycle, the better.
Kevin, speaking a CEO, CRO board's language, this is dollars. Zane, how about for you? How do you define the value of an effective content strategy?
Yeah, I would have given the answer Kevin gave if he hadn't given it already. All we want to think about is through, the funnel and how can you make different, parts of the funnel tighten up. But maybe one more thing I would add would be just the title of the show, which is trust. And again, you can, I guess, merge it in because it'll show up in the metrics that you track. But I would say just building trust with your customers, audience is also essential, I think. And obviously, a winning content strategy would help you do that.
Yeah, I love that because you guys touch on short and long term. Kevin was kind of it implied long term, but short term, like, hey, this is the value, which is it's gonna bring you more dollars, but the trust is what's gonna encourage repeat business. Is it gonna allow you to charge more for your product or services if you built those relationships, and content is the conduit to those relationships. Kevin, maybe I'll go back to you for this one, which is what are the maybe some of the pillars of an effective content strategy? When someone says content strategy, here are the 3 or 4 things that go into it to make it successful. What are those?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you have to meet your buyer where they are, and you have to understand their decision-making process, and you have to understand the types of resources that they're trying to access to go through that decision-making process. So a lot of times people think about their content strategy and they think, oh, who is my audience? Who is my persona? And then they take kind of the message that they want to project in the marketplace, and then they tweak some of the words to kind of fit the presumed persona of who they're trying to target. Defining that persona, step number one. Step number two isn't just immediately just tailoring your existing message to them. Step number two is understanding what is their decision-making criteria, what is their decision-making process. Map it out. And then after you map it out, map out the types of resources that they're going to need to access, because they're going to access those resources somehow. They're going to call your rep. They're going to go to your website. They're going to go do a Google search. They will eventually find those resources to make that decision. Your job is to figure out what is that decision-making process, what are the resources that they're trying to ask, map it out, and then provide it to them up front so that you provide a simpler, easier experience to get them from point A to point B. It's not about what you want to tell them, just kind of tweak to their persona. It's about deeply understanding how you can facilitate, a decision to buy, and a decision to buy specifically for you. Now, the types of resources they're going to be looking at obviously are going to be multifaceted. They're going to be looking at resources that help them identify problems you solve. They're going to be looking for resources that help them understand how you solve that problem. They're going to be looking for resources that enable them to understand how to implement your solution to solve that problem. They're going to be looking for validation from other third parties and other customers. So you also have to have a variety of different resources and be prepared not only to have the business resources and the high level messaging, but also all of the technical resources that they're going to need. Because today's buying committees aren't just looking for, oh, you can solve problem A, B, and C. Perfect, great, let's talk. No, they want to know at a very detailed technical level how they can actually self-serve and how they can do it themselves.
Yeah, Kevin, affectionately called the GOAT by many who know you. And I think that answer was one of the reasons that you're affectionately called that sometimes, which is, I think marketers traditionally think about, like you said, personas, the message, and the value and benefits of that. But if the deal is being led and being driven by a certain persona, let's say it's a director of marketing or the head of IT, right? It's not just helping them understand how to solve their problems. It's enabling them to
Yep,
go sell internally, to go to the C-suite.
100%.
Here's the ROI. It's enabling them to convince someone within the organization who might have an affinity towards another solution that you've worked with their competitors. So it's like, how do you enable that person who's going to drive the buying process and then give them all the content for each of the people in the committee, right? That is a different mindset than
It's a
how
different mindset. And you know, you have to look at it through that lens. There's sales enablement. So what do you do to arm your sellers to be effective in communicating to customers?
Yep.
Then there's customer enablement. Because
Yep.
really what you're in the business of in content marketing, it's customer enablement. So they themselves can be that effective seller.
And that's becoming more and more critical. All the Gartner research, all the Forrester research says that, more and more of the buyer journey is taking place online. So it is that customer enablement or prospect enablement that is becoming essentially a sales channel.
Yep.
Right. And so those things are becoming closer and closer. So we're kind of hitting on it already, Zain. I'm actually going to kind of move to you for the next question is, how do you measure the impact of content strategy? What maybe what are you seeing from some of our clients and the ROI that they're looking to get out of both the system and the content that's produced?
Yeah. So I guess there's obviously the obvious ones, just tracking any engagement metrics. You know, if you talk about socials, then likes, comments, time, website traffic, obviously not for socials, but I guess the traffic and engagement is the top one, and then you have conversions that we track for every piece of content, and I guess it also shows up in different areas of the organization. Kevin mentioned, customer enablement, so it will show up in your customer retention and loyalty metrics, whatever they are that you track. Um, and I guess one thing that I would also like to think about is the cost. So I would say there should be some kind of an efficiency metric, a cost of production, whether how much reusability and any ROI that you can track. So yeah, I'm sure I missed a dozen. So Kevin, maybe you can shed some light.
Yeah. So I always like to look at, one particular lens, which is identifying clusters of customers that consume a variety of resources, right? So the wonderful part is if you have someone that is not just, visiting a couple of web pages, but also, looking at some technical documentation, also watching some videos, the increase of different types of content they're consuming means their intent to buy is super high. If they're just looking at web pages, great. If they're just looking at videos, great. If they're just looking at case studies, great. They're looking at a variety of different research. They're doing deep research. They're literally going through their decision-making process. They're looking at the case study, they're looking at the video, they're looking at they're going through their decision-making process. And there's like patterns that you can identify, right? And you can cluster around. So you can say there's a cluster of people that kind of look at these sets of resources. There's a cluster of people that look at these sets of resources. And then, Zain, to your point on the effectiveness and the efficiency measure, then you can start winnowing out, like, I need to produce more content that fits these clusters of buying behavior, right? And then some of the other content that's not being consumed in those patterns, you can start demoting and do less of. And of course, the magic is if you have two or more people from the same organization that are consuming three or more different types of content. That's always kind of what I look for. Do you have two or more people from the same organization that's consuming three or more different types of content, both business content, validation content, technical content? Because that's a surefire winner that there's a lot of tire kicking going on there.
Yeah, Kevin, the idea of the amount of content consumption across personas and categories
Yeah,
and mediums is an indicator of the relationship. And in every piece of that content, whether it's there, it's right, it's has the depth that they need, is an opportunity to build trust or lose trust, right?
exactly.
But
So
it's
like the big rage right now is everyone's interested in like intent signals, and let's get intent signals to automatically filter up the highest, priority target accounts, right? And we spend all this money to get intent signals from Zoom Info or from G2 or elsewhere. You also have your internal intent signals, right? So monitor your own internal intent signals, right? You have your technical documents, you have your case studies, like there's signals there. So register your own intent signals. There's what they're doing off your properties, but then there's what they're doing on your properties, and look for those signals as well.
Yeah, and Kevin, last thing I might add here before we continue on is just this idea that your content strategy can inform your go-to-market. Like if in some cases you have this wide array of content and it is designed to target specific personas, but if one kind of category of content rises to the top,
Yeah, exactly.
services deals, then you have an understanding of who that internal buyer is. You might think it's a
Right.
director of marketing, but all of a sudden it's the head of IT. And so the content strategy, yes, is about moving people into the funnel, creating deeper trust with them. But it also provides some indicators and some data around, how you should be moving with your go-to-market and what your buyers are telling you.
Yeah, this is like we talk about testing all the time. It's like, oh, let's test this email variant or that email variant.
Yep.
Well, if you identify like clusters of customers that consume certain types of content in a pattern. So I have a cluster of customers, they're like this IT buying persona, they're consuming the following different categories of types of content. Throw in a piece of content that is maybe similar enough, but a little different, and see if that content winds up starting to get consumed as well. So I'll just give you an example here at Vultr. We produce a lot of high quality technical documentation, and we just recently introduced a new type of technical documentation that we never produced before because we're running it. It's kind of like a test to see if that starts getting consumed as well, right? And if that starts getting consumed, then there might be essentially like this concept of drift, which is like you're suddenly allowing your content to pull you to new buyers or closer to your existing buyer, right? And then meanwhile, when we're introducing that piece of content type, we're actually discontinuing another type of content that we previously produced, and we're just running a test. Like, is this going to give us closer to the customer? It might even wind up leading us to a new buyer persona altogether.
Yep. Yeah, it's amazing what it can give you concrete direction on where you are right now, or concrete inputs on where you are right now, but also where the business is going. The content is going to help dictate that. Zain, I know you talked to some of our largest customers, and I want to kind of get into operationalizing content strategy. We're talking about the value quite a bit there. So Zain, maybe you can talk about what we see in terms of the key players who are involved in creating, deploying, and optimizing the content strategy.
Yeah, that's an easy one. Given we are a content management system, I guess those are the spectrum of the users engaging with the platform. I would say at the start, obviously there's a strategy. There's a content strategist. This next step is to create and I guess distribute the content creation teams, and then distribution, you can call them marketing teams. And then the next step I would say would be just to track the performance, whether that's data analytics or whatever we call them, business users, who are not really marketers or content people, but they're definitely informing content decisions, what's performing and what's not performing. And Ryan, as you know, we've been talking about content analytics, obviously focused on this persona or user. And then lastly, but for us, most importantly, are the devs, people who are in the system building applications, front end frameworks and whatnot. Given our customers tend to be, as you said, large enterprises, there are definitely compliance teams in there too. Legal and compliance is probably one of the, depends, if you're an e-commerce business, maybe not so much, but financial services, healthcare, government, what we serve, we see a lot of those teams as part of the content process.
Yeah. No, thanks for that, Zane. I think one of the things that is interesting that you talked about the business users, you talked about kind of a multi-brand, multi-region environment is this emergence of new content authors as part of that strategy. Kevin talked about the depth needed for technical documentation, even on the consumer side of things. There is there's diligence that's being done. So subject matter expertise,
Yeah.
partners, a variety of stakeholders who are starting to weigh in the content lifecycle because of the buyer journey becoming online. So taking account for what is central and distributed across an organization and the analytics to support that, as well as how do you create the workflows to support everyone who needs to put content in to enable that full buying cycle is, I think, things that we continue to see on a day-to-day basis. Kevin, maybe too, I just, on this topic of, content volume and the content life cycle, how do you think about the content your team produces? And how do you track all the content that you have live and, throughout
Yeah.
your content strategy?
We produce a lot of content.
Yeah.
So it's a massive pipeline, and we do it really in three primary ways. Actually, I should say four. So one way is we actually crowdsource a lot of our content. So a lot of our technical content, because our field, AI, is changing every single day, we built an entire system and workflow so that we solicit ideas for the types of content people want to see. And sometimes we solicit those ideas by just looking at what people are searching for on Google and saying, hey, do you want to see more content like this, more content like that? And then, if that's what people want to see, we actually literally outsource the development to something we call our creator program. We have like nearly 900 people around the globe that basically write content. They say, I'll write about that. I'll document that for you. They document it, and then our editorial team goes through and validates, cleans up, tests, and confirms the documentation. So what this means is, like, whatever the hot topic is of the day, we literally just say, is this a hot topic? Do we need a document like this? And then someone raised their hand and said, yes, I'll write it. And then we give it to them, and then they have a number of days to write it, and then we produce it. So it lets us move at a very fast speed to catch hot topical things that are relevant to people. The other thing we do is, we have two different editorial teams. So the second part is we have one editorial team that does nothing but just monitor, major news items. So if there's something topical happening in the news from a business perspective versus a technical perspective, we'll write our definitive point of view on that, and we'll get that out very, very quickly, right? And then the third kind of content pipeline is for just core product and, core go to market. And that content is produced very, very rapidly based on, things coming out of our product, what we're learning from our customers, things that we're learning in support cases, and so on and so forth. So we have like three very distinct pipelines that all operate simultaneously. And I guess the fourth backplane to that is we're now introducing kind of new AI-driven content pipelines so that when someone's searching for something on our property upcoming in Q1, they'll just tell us what they're interested in, and then across all the documents that we produced, we'll generate something on the fly unique to them based on everything that we've already authored.
Wow. So Kevin, the first thing that comes to mind on that, because you have contributors, right?
Right.
Then you're writing on a point of view on topics related to ever-changing AI. And then you have partners like NVIDIA and AMD that I'm sure some of your content is connected to.
Source from, right, exactly.
So how do you manage the compliance? Because I'm just thinking the amount of risk with the change that's going on, to ensure with AI that something you write isn't liability into it. So I'm just
exactly. So source articles are never written by AI. They're only written by a person, and everything that's written has to get tested and validated by an entire editorial team. And every step in that process goes through a very detailed, approval workflow, compliance check, audit trail, 100%, like massive compliance across the board. Every piece of content we produce has to get tested and validated. It has to be absolutely dead accurate. So there are people that have to validate that. Where we are starting to use AI, however, is if we have 10,000 authoritative technical documents and you want to accomplish a task, it might relate to 10 different technical documents. So as opposed to making it harder for you to look up this document, then read this document, you just tell us what you want to do, and then we'll aggregate essentially all those 10 documents and we'll generate a new long form document, which is everything you need to know. So you don't have to read 10 things, you just read one thing. But what's generated, it's all from the existing authoritative content. So it's 100% trusted a priori.
So now we know why you chose long form content in the rapid.
That's why I chose long form content.
Because of your unique approach to consolidate documents.
Exactly. So we produce all of this short form content that's all just one page, consumable, readable in 3 to 5 minutes. But if you're going through a decision-making process, as opposed to having you read this thing and then read that thing, we'll just generate one long form piece, and then you have one thing you can bookmark and take your leisurely time to go through it, and it's all you need to do, one-stop shop.
Love it. Awesome. And so I think we could stay on that topic for a long time because of how you're generating that output. I think folks are probably fascinated by, but I'm going to tell them to reach out to you on LinkedIn to continue that. My question is around, with all this volume of content you're creating, and Zain would love for you to weigh in too, how do you ensure that you're getting the value out of that content and it's getting the proper reuse? Because let's say you write on a topic that is tied to a series of news events and it gets pushed once. How do you think about, let's call it, full utilization of content, which includes how often?
So it's a great question. So remember, we have 3 pipelines of content. So 2 of those pipelines is more like ephemeral content. It's like topic du jours, right? And the longevity of any one of those individual pieces of short-term content might be very, very short time to life, right? But what it does, and I think what the power is now that we're unlocking, is all of that short form content that was a point in time addressing a particular need, it's still incredibly valuable insights and data, so that when someone's asking a question in the future, you can draw on this deep reservoir of knowledge to pull from it to make something that's relevant, topical, and personalized for the problem at hand.
I love how you're using AI to do that, because Kevin, one of the age-old challenges for marketers is they say, hey, we need to create content on topic X. Don't we already have something that is
exactly
in-house? And you say
100%.
Only 50% of it is of value. And what you've done is now you're extracting that value of that old piece of content through AI.
Exactly.
Sorry, go ahead, Kevin. Did you have a follow-up?
No, you completely nailed it.
Okay, cool. Zain, I was going to ask you, this is a question that we get from our clients a decent amount, which is like volume of content versus depth of content, because they only have a finite number of resources to be able to produce that content. Like a global brand that we work with that has thousands of sites, and they're like, well, how deep do I need to go with my content in order to get the most use out of the system? So how do we typically advise clients on volume of content versus depth of content, and finding that sweet spot?
Yeah, I guess my response to that would be same as maybe the first response I gave when I said it has to probably be audience driven. And again, depends on the product, right? If you're selling a beverage, then it's probably going to be pretty short form versus what Kevin is sharing about a very technical product, where longer is better, because it gives you an opportunity to not only detail the technical specs of the product, but also differentiate, with your insights and expertise. So I mean, that's the short of it. Again, for us, it's always a mix. And I guess it's also platform driven, LinkedIn versus TikTok versus X, versus blogs and white papers. I think it depends. So if your audience, to Kevin's point, if they're engaging with a mix of short form, then you do more of that. I guess analytics also play in here. Yeah,
No, that's
that's great.
great, Gene, because I think what you're saying is it is, having the choice to be able to deploy long form, which might have multiple stakeholders who need to weigh in and contribute, or short form that is really about, kind of getting eyeballs and staying in front of consumers, like, knowing who the audience is, knowing what they need. And then also, like you said at the end, the content analytics is critical. You might think a consumer brand might not need a whole lot of content, but there's, with more and more conscientious consumers around, the manufacturing processes, how things are distributed, those things are starting to become more important. And so keeping an eye on the macro trends and then having the opportunity to deploy a bunch of different types of content at scale is going to be really important. Going back to trust, it's really understanding your audience. And I think that kind of leads me into the future of content strategy. Zain is always, I can always count on him for a good transition with his answer. So thanks for that. Let's talk about the mix of human and AI generated content. You hear a lot about AI slop right now. Obviously the storms down south created a bunch of noise with what was created and this emergence of AI slop. There's also a huge opportunity to engage the full buying cycle by using the power of generative AI. Kevin, maybe I'll start with you. Like, what are your thoughts about, or how do you guys at Vultr think about using AI to generate content versus content that is generated by humans?
Yeah, so we have a strong preference for original content coming from human beings. So the human mind is the only thing that's capable of creative expression, right? The human mind is the only thing that's capable of actually innovative thought, right? AI is essentially just regurgitating things based on, prior past training runs, right? At the end of the day. So you have to have your own original content. And yes, you can train a model on your own original content, and it can generate facsimiles of that original content to deliver a tailored response to an end user. But you got to create the original base of content and then turn it over to the AI so the AI can then, deliver the very specific answer that people are looking from, the training corpus that you provided. But yeah, I would never use content AI to generate original content ever.
Yeah. Zain, thoughts on that?
No, 100% agree. I guess I'll share a little bit of my thinking on this. The first approach is, I don't know who said that, it's marketers or creative people have a challenge, which is the blank page or blank slate problem.
Right.
It's very difficult to start something creative.
Right.
So AI can maybe give you a first draft, but to Kevin's point, that also ends up probably limiting the creativity because it kind of boxes you in, and it's kind of a summary of previous expression rather than any kind of a new expression. So just understanding and knowing the limitations of that approach, again, it can help in certain areas, maybe not so much on others. And the second is the reverse, which is you have a long form content, for example, and then you load that into the AI and use that to summarize
Yep.
or provide snippets for social
Exactly.
media, which I believe, or what I'm hearing from marketers is what AI does actually far better than anything else. Right? So use that as the reverse. And I guess the third thing might be a little controversial. The creative people is also, at least I've played around with Midjourney, for example, the image generation app. You can definitely push the boundaries of imagination on some of the visual stuff,
Yep.
whether that's design or whether that's imagery. I guess whether or not you use it is a different conversation, but it can definitely visualize things by combining different ideas together and giving you a new approach. That's probably something that you can use AI for. But again, agreeing with Kevin, all of this needs, to go through a human being. And you can be like the orchestrator of these things instead of completely automating content generation through AI.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, which is giving it the long form content and then letting AI generate a lot of the snippets in the short form. Perfect use. Couldn't agree more with that. And yeah, everything that I spoke about was with respect to LLM specifically, right? But I think the realm of unlocking creativity through leveraging things like, Flux, for example, I think that's a totally different ballgame.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that's really interesting to me is that it can give another perspective in the room. If you think about a brainstorming session and you have three creatives and two content strategists in the room,
Mhm.
if you utilize some of the tools that Zane mentioned, it provides an opportunity to have almost a third perspective about what is that out there on the web, or what other
Right.
designs and concepts that you might not have come across that it can then surface for you based on the model. So
Yeah, diversity matters, right? So, the more diverse viewpoints you have in a room, you always lead to better outcomes. And, you know, the one thing AI can do is like be that other voice that can represent kind of, you know, the trained view of everything that's previously been expressed on the web, and it's just one more input that can maybe spark a conversation for a bunch of human beings to debate and consider and then build on.
I think that's a great takeaway for our listeners, Kevin, which is one of the main reasons you use AI is it is increasing the diversity of thought, at
Right.
its at its baseline level. Okay, just two more questions. I'm gonna try and get you guys out of the hot seats and on with your day. When you think about where AI in your content strategy should best be used, we always, and I'm using traditional thinking here, top of the funnel, mid funnel, bottom of the funnel. In generalities, where is AI best used in the kind of content lifecycle? Does it typically sit top of the funnel, utilization, bottom of the funnel? Kevin, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's a little bit of a challenging question. I think it's kind of a little bit of both, to be honest with you. On one hand, you're going to leverage AI very heavily in top of the funnel to take your existing long form content and generate short snippets of it, right? So there's a heavy use of AI in that, specifically when you're distributing, things out on LinkedIn, Twitter, and so on and so forth. I mean, we all know the challenge of that. It's hard to keep up with everything that needs to get posted on LinkedIn, everything that needs to get posted on X. It's just tough, right? So automating a lot of that content through AI, a great thing to be able to do. And of course, that all has to come from long form content that actual real human people, real human beings wrote. But on the other hand, right, there's a lot of shorter form content, which is your point of view on topic A, your point of view on topic B, that ultimately human beings need to write because it's what are your thoughts on a particular topic. And that can also be summarized and generated into longer form content. So it's a little bit of a mix depending on what you're trying to accomplish. But there's
Yep.
a role for it in all aspects of the life cycle.
I appreciate that. That's great. And I think it is having that lens and some concrete use cases on where it can
Right.
be used at each phase
That's right.
is super helpful. Zane, anything you wanted to add there?
I guess the other angle is the analytics piece. I guess AI is really good at going through massive data and then providing insights. So whether that is to do rapid A/B testing of your messaging to your audience, or talk about content analytics also. And the last piece is, I guess, the SEO optimization piece,
Sure.
where it can you know um, surf the internet, tell you what trends are, and you can use that information.
100%.
Kevin alluded to earlier to what is being searched, and then use that as a source to create content. So yeah, the thing I would add is just data analytics overall.
That's great, Zane.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm going to ask you guys one more question, which is to give a takeaway or two to our listeners on the key things you want them to walk away with. Because we've talked about the ROI of content and building an effective content strategy in the age of AI. We've talked about the pillars and the people and what goes into that once you've convinced your exec leadership that you need to invest in an effective content strategy. And then we've talked about the specific ways that AI is being utilized. Kevin's given us some great examples, as well as concrete places that you can use it within building an effective content strategy. So we've covered a lot of ground, guys. Maybe I'll start with you, Kevin. if someone is walking away from this webinar and they say, I learned these one or two things about how to build an effective content strategy in the age of AI, what would you want them to walk away with?
You can't have an effective content strategy without leveraging AI.
Oh.
Your buyers are going through a decision-making process, and you need to generate the volume and variety of content they need to help them speed to a decision. And on 100%, whether it's generating short-form content, generating the long-form content, you need to deliver that one-to-one experience. And the only way you're going to scale your human workforce is by leveraging AI.
Love it. Thank you, Kevin. Zain, how about for you? One or two key takeaways for our listeners.
I guess just going back to something Kevin said earlier is you got to map it out. You got to map out the journey, and you got to map out all your assets, and you got to reuse the heck out of the content because it's hard. And as we talked, it's good if you can have a muscle that can produce long form content and then reuse that in short form in other areas of the funnel. So yeah, that would be my major. And again, I was thinking about a lot of these things as Kevin was saying, so we got to go and do some of that work ourselves.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, Zain, it was a pleasure spending time with both of you. To our audience, we appreciate you joining the third episode of a Real Talk, Real Trust. It's been great to spend time with you. I'm your host, Ryan Picchini, and we'll see you on the next one very, very, very soon. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Zain.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.